$380 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That staggering figure is the cost of just one of the absolute latest high numerical aperture EUV machines. We're talking about a 150,000 kilogram behemoth. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the weight of 2 fully loaded Airbus commercial airliners, and it's packed with 100,000 highly specialized parts. And the craziest part? It is produced by exactly one company on the entire planet, ASML, based in a quiet suburb in the Netherlands.
So it begs a pretty obvious question, which is what we're exploring today. Why can't a manufacturing powerhouse like China, equipped with massive state-backed funds and literally millions of brilliant engineers, simply dismantle an ASML scanner and copy the technology? Why can't the quote-unquote factory of the world just reverse engineer it? Well, the short answer is that this isn't a problem of money or political willpower. It is a problem of extreme physics. That brings us to Section 1, hitting the physics wall. To really understand ASML's incredible defensive moat, we first have to look at the technological brick wall the industry crashed into with their older tech, which was known as deep ultraviolet, or DUV.
So for decades, the industry used 193 nanometer DUV light to basically print chip patterns. But as transistors shrank down to these insane 10 and 7 nanometer physical thresholds, that light hit its physical diffraction limit. Think about it like trying to paint a microscopic portrait using a thick, clumsy housemating brush. It just doesn't work. The industry desperately needed a perfectly precise surgical scalpel. They needed extreme ultraviolet light measuring exactly 13.5 nanometers.
Because without that EUV scalpel, foundries are forced into what is basically a multi-patterning nightmare. Instead of making one clean pass to draw a circuit, the silicon wafer has to go through the DUV scanner 3, 4, maybe even more times. And the costs just absolutely skyrocket because every single layer has to align with absolute perfect sub-nanometer precision. If you're off by even a fraction of a nanometer, the transistors won't connect and the chip is dead. It's operationally tedious and a complete economic disaster waiting to happen.
All right, moving to Section 2, creating extreme ultraviolet light. Let's look at how ASML actually solved this problem. Because the process they use is so incredibly violent and precision-engineered, it honestly borders on science fiction. Here's the thing. 13.5 nanometer light doesn't just occur naturally on Earth. So the machine has to create it by executing this mind-bending, 4-step laser-produced plasma sequence inside a pitch-black vacuum chamber. First, it fires ultra-pure molten tin droplets downward at up to 80 meters per second. Then a low-intensity laser pre-pulse smacks the tin to flatten it out into a pancake shape. And then, boom, the main laser obliterates that pancake, vaporizing it into a superheated 220,000 degrees Celsius plasma. Yep, you heard that right. It literally creates a microscopic supernova right there in the machine just to harvest the resulting EUV light.
But wait, it gets crazier. That entire microscopic supernova sequence I just described, it must be executed perfectly 50,000 times every single second. 50,000! And even with all that effort, it only achieves about a 5.5% conversion efficiency. Oh, and to keep the machine's optics clean from all that exploding tin debris, ASML literally had to invent a microscopic hydrogen hurricane inside the vacuum chamber just to blow the stray atoms out of the way.
If you're struggling to wrap your head around how difficult that is, an ASML executive gave us this absolutely perfect analogy. When you look at the localized spatial and temporal accuracy you need to control these light beams and physical matter at that speed, it is literally akin to standing on Earth, shining a laser pointer into the sky, and successfully hitting a specific coin resting on the surface of the moon. It's just unbelievable. And because this EUV light is so incredibly fragile, creating it is only the first hurdle. Standard lenses would just absorb the light entirely. So instead, the light bounces across 11 Bragg-reflecting mirrors. These meter-wide mirrors are made by Zeiss, and they are polished smooth to tens of picometers. For context, that is a measurement smaller than a single atom. They feature 100 alternating atomic layers of silicon and molybdenum. But even with all of that near-perfect engineering, less than 2% of the original light actually survives to reach the silicon wafer. Okay, Section 3. Orchestrating a global symphony. Because here is the crux of the cloning problem. Reverse engineering the hardware only tells you what was built. It doesn't tell you how to build it. And that brings us to the sprawling network of advanced partners that ASML relies on.
Attempting to clone this machine means you have to perfectly and simultaneously recreate the absolute apex achievements of multiple nations. You need the fast-flow carbon dioxide lasers from Trumpf in Germany. You need the insane droplet physics from Cymer in the US. You need those atomic-level mirrors from Zeiss. And you need the robotic wafer handlers from the VDL group in the Netherlands, which, by the way, use magnetic levitation in a vacuum to accelerate at 3 Gs while stopping with sub-nanometer precision.
And no, you cannot just buy these parts off the shelf. ASML operates within tightly coupled, exclusive development alliances. Zeiss, for example, literally cannot sell these specific mirrors to anyone else. They are locked in. And geopolitically speaking, China has been thoroughly isolated from this entire orchestra through stringent US export controls and multilateral diplomatic agreements. They are completely cut off from these apex global partners.
Which brings us to Section 4, the ultimate defensive moat. Now, this usually sparks an interesting debate. What if state-sponsored hackers just stole everything? If they exfiltrated all the blueprints, the CAD files, the schematics, wouldn't that be enough to just build a copy?
Well, that assumption totally ignores the single most powerful defense mechanism in high-end manufacturing: tacit knowledge. This is the unwritten, intuitive know-how that veteran engineers, technicians, and machinists build up over decades of hands-on, trial, error, and physical tinkering. It is deep experiential context, and it exists solely within the minds and the hands of the people who actually do the work.
Think of it like this. Explicit knowledge gives you the wiring diagram of a laser, or the digitized blueprint of a part. But tacit knowledge is what allows an integration engineer to actually troubleshoot a microscopic failure when liquid tin is flying around at highway speeds. It's the physical, intuitive calibration techniques for aligning a dual-pulse laser. You simply cannot steal that kind of experience on a flash drive.
So, moving on to Section 5, China's billion-dollar bottleneck. Without access to these EUV machines and without that deeply entrenched tacit knowledge, we have to look at the real-world fallout for China's domestic foundries right now. Due to those expanding export controls we talked about, China's leading foundry, SMIC, is forced to rely on stockpiles of the older DUV tech to fabricate their advanced 7-nanometer chips. That means they are stuck dealing with that dreaded multi-patterning technique, and it drastically multiplies their catastrophic defects. Seriously, a single misaligned nanometer or a microscopic speck of dust on the third pass ruins an entire chip. Because of this, SMIC reportedly has to charge 40 to 50% more than TSMC for the exact same class of silicon, and they suffer massive scrap rates that keep their successful chip yields way below the necessary 80% commercial standard. And this structurally baked-in disadvantage leads to a truly staggering disparity in production volume. Over in Taiwan, TSMC's highly efficient EUV lines are turning out around 120,000 advanced wafers every single month. Meanwhile, SMIC's bottlenecked multi-patterning output is estimated at barely 4,000 wafers. It is a brutal, massive margin, and it absolutely dictates global competitiveness in the tech sector. Ultimately, it all boils down to a pretty profound truth. Limitless capital cannot purchase a time machine. The reality is that China isn't just trying to copy a piece of hardware here. They are attempting to artificially compress over 40 years of compounded global collaboration, shared financial risk, cross-border research, and constant iterative failure into a single, isolated decade entirely in the dark. And so, we are left with the ultimate, unforgiving moat of time. In a manufacturing realm where the margin for error is measured in individual atoms, ASML's monopoly is secured not just by patents or exclusive supply chains or export controls, it is secured by the sheer reality-bending complexity of the machine itself. Which leaves us with one final thought. Even with billions of dollars at your disposal, can anyone truly buy their way around the laws of physics and time? Think about that the next time you pick up your smartphone. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.